HR Funk here. I'm bringing you a video today that I thought would be kind of fun and also rather informative, and it also gives me a chance to use my new Lyman trigger pull gauge. After needing one of these things for years, I finally broke down a few weeks ago and bought one. And I thought it might be fun to be able to go back through and look at some of the firearms that I've had in previous videos, many of which that I've commented about the triggers on, and see exactly what the trigger pull weight is with these. Now, a lot of them, as I said a minute ago, I've commented on rather subjectively. The trigger feels good, trigger feels light, trigger doesn't feel so good. So we can actually quantify what our trigger pull weight is with the Lyman scale. Now, one point that I want to make before I get started, trigger pull weight is not the sole determining factor when it comes to trigger pull quality. In fact, up to a point, it's important to have a good, clean break with no creep and no over travel, as much so as it is to have a trigger that's not overly heavy. Now, that being said, once you get to a certain trigger pull weight, probably somewhere north of about 7 or 8 pounds, weight does definitely start to become more of a factor. But if you have something like a double action revolver where you're up around 8, 9, 10 pounds, maybe even a little bit more with some models, having a nice smooth double action pull is also important. Now, a quick point about the Lyman trigger pull gauge. There is a little bit of a technique to using one of these things. You have to be careful as you're pulling that you stop the instant the trigger breaks. If not, you're going to get an erroneous reading. In fact, it's going to read a little bit heavier than the trigger actually is. The other thing you need to make sure you're doing is pulling directly back against the trigger. Now, because this gauge is going to be placed somewhere on the trigger, the lower down the trigger, the more leverage the gauge has and the lighter the trigger pull is going to read, or maybe I should say the easier it's going to break because of that leverage. So I do try to place the trigger right, or place the gauge right in the middle of the trigger to give us the best average pull. Now, with some triggers, if it has a safety built into it, I might have to place it a little bit lower just to get the trigger to release. So with all that being said, let's take a look at some of these firearms and see what our trigger pulls measure. First up is my 2.5-inch Model 19 Combat Magnum from my very last video. Now, what I'm going to do is show each one of these as clear before I test the trigger. I'm a little bit paranoid about that. I don't know why. When I'm using this thing, it's like, in my mind, I want to make absolutely certain that I have an unloaded firearm. So I'm going to show that to you folks just so you can see, and I can see before I test the trigger. Last thing I want to do is put a bullet hole through my basement wall. In any regard, let's test the double action pull first. Again, I want to pull straight back. £10, 2.2 ounces. So not an overly light double action pull, but it is very smooth. Let's try it again. You should do this several times and take an average. I'm only going to do it a couple of times. One more time on the double action pull. £10 and just under 1 ounce. So it's about a 10-pound double action pull. Now let's try the single action. £3, 3.7 ounces. That's a single action pull. Let's try one more. £3, 5.8 ounces. So a little less than 3.5 pounds on my 2.5-inch Model 19 Combat Magnum. Next up is my Remington Enhanced Commander. Now, you may recall when I made this video, I said this pistol has the best trigger pull of any factory 1911 that I own, and really better than many 1911s that I have felt over the years. So let's see what the weight is where this trigger actually breaks. First, again, check it. Make absolutely certain that the pistol is empty. With the 1911, since it's not hinged at the top, it doesn't make as much difference where the trigger pull gauge is on the trigger itself because it pulls straight back. We do have to make sure the grip safety is depressed. And here we go. 4 pounds, 11.1 ounces. Let's try it again. Four pounds, 13.1 ounces. Let's give this one more. Right at 4.5 pounds. 4 pounds, 8 ounces. I've gotten even lighter pulls on this before. Again, this is a very good trigger, breaks very cleanly, and we can see it's right about 4.5 pounds, maybe just a little bit heavier on the Lyman trigger pull gauge. Next up, let's look at a couple of high powers. Now, with this particular pistol, this is my Charles Daly HP, and I have replaced the trigger spring with a new one from VH Spring Solutions. I've not really modified the trigger system at all other than that. It does have a VH Spring Solution recoil spring in as well. But it does have a very good trigger. Now, this has the magazine disconnect removed, which also helps to have the trigger feel a little bit better and a little bit lighter. Let's see where this breaks. Now, since I've removed the magazine disconnect, I don't have to have a magazine inserted in my Charles Daly HP. And let's see where the trigger breaks. 5 pounds, 13.7 ounces. So a little shy of 6 pounds. Let's try it again. Six pounds, 4.7 ounces, and that's right about where this trigger breaks. It's about a 6-pound trigger, which, as high powers go, is not too bad. Let's try one more. And this one was just a little below 6 pounds, 5 pounds, 14.4 ounces. Now we'll switch gears and try the new to me Browning Mark III high power. This one does still have the magazine disconnect, but it also has a very good trigger for a factory Browning high power. I do have to insert the magazine, but I will show you first that there is nothing in the pistol, nothing in the magazine. 5 pounds, 8.8 ounces, just over 5.5 pounds. This is a factory Browning trigger. I've heard a lot of people complain about these over the years, particularly the pistols that still have the magazine disconnect. This one still has it in place and it's breaking at 5.5 pounds. Let's try it again. £5 pounds, 6.9 ounces on a factory Browning high power Mark III. Very good trigger, breaking at about 5.5 pounds. Nothing has been done to this trigger. Okay folks, let's try some rifle triggers. This is my Rock River Arms A4 National Match rifle. In order for it to be legal for service rifle competitions, it has to have a trigger that breaks at least 4.5 pounds. I'm guessing this is going to be just a little over 4.5 pounds, probably about 4 3/4. Let's take a look. £4 pounds, 5.3 ounces. Just made legal trigger weight with that pull. Let's try it again. That one was a little bit heavier. 5 pounds, 4.2 ounces, and I might have actually accidentally pulled it a little bit longer after the break. Let's try one more. £5 pounds, 4.9 ounces. So breaking a little heavier than I thought it was going to, and some of this might be me. It's difficult to try to get a good pull on this while the rifle is in the rack. So that could be contributing to this a little bit too. When I've checked it before, just holding in my hand and pulling, it's been breaking about 4 3/4 pounds, give or take. So let's try something else. Okay, how about we try an M14? Actually, this is my Springfield Armory M1A Super Match rifle. It does have a match trigger. Let's see how this does. Just under 5 pounds. 4 pounds, 14.1 ounces. Let's try one more. £4 pounds, 13.4 ounces. One more time. And again, 4 pounds, 13.4 ounces. Not only is that a very good trigger, but it's also very consistent, as you can see. And how about the granddaddy of my service rifles? This is my M1. It has a perfectly stock GI trigger, so let's see where this pulls. Again, before we get started, the rifle is empty. Definitely heavier than the M1A, breaking at 6 pounds, 13.3 ounces, so getting close to 7 pounds there. Let's try it again. £6 pounds, 14.7. Let's try one more. And 6 pounds, 9.6 ounces. So again, we see the difference between the match trigger in the M1A and the stock GI trigger in the M1, about 2 pounds heavier. This one should be fun. This is my vintage sniper rifle, my vintage sniper match rifle, which is a James River Armory model 1903 A4 reproduction. It does have a nice trigger. Let's see where it breaks. Again, we'll check. I do have a snap cap in here, not an actual cartridge. Just over 4 pounds. 4 pounds, 0.5 ounces. £4 pounds, 1.4 ounces. Let's try one more. £3 pounds, 13.5 ounces. So this trigger is breaking right about 4 pounds, and it breaks very nicely. This is more or less a GI trigger in this rifle. I don't know if James River did anything to them or not, but as you can see, it's a very nice trigger, and this is an exceptionally accurate rifle. The trigger only helps to add to that accuracy. Okay, this one should be fun. This is my Remington 700P. This is the rifle that I've deployed with for years as a sniper for my police department's tactical team. I can tell you it has a very good trigger. Let's see where it breaks. Oh, by the way, this is the old Remington trigger. Now, there's a lot of concern about these, that somehow the rifle's going to fire itself or whatever. I have over 3,500 fully documented shots with this rifle. I've never had a problem with the trigger. With these older Remington triggers, if you keep them clean and you don't fiddle with them, trying to make them lighter, you won't have a problem. So let's see where this one breaks. Oh, by the way, again, nothing in the rifle and nothing up my sleeve. Folks, that's a trigger. 3 pounds, 2.1 ounces. I really would not want that trigger any lighter for actual use in the field. Now, if it was strictly a target gun, if the only time it ever came out of the case was on the range and someone wanted to have a lighter trigger, that's one thing. But for what I do with this rifle and what other tactical team snipers do, I would not want that trigger any lighter, and it breaks like a dream. Let's try another one. £3 pounds, 1.9 ounces. Let's try one more. 3 pounds, 12.4 ounces. A little bit heavier on that one, and that could have just been me pulling it a little bit longer beyond the break. Like I said, there is some technique to using this thing, but you can see there's a very good trigger on that rifle. Okay, folks, I'm going to finish up with a trio of Smith&Wesson M&Ps. First up is my M&P Shield. Now, I have always felt like the trigger on this particular pistol is kind of heavy compared to my other M&Ps, so let's find out what the pull weight on it actually is. Before we start, again, safety check, just to show you there's nothing in there. £7 6.1 ounces. So this is pretty heavy for a trigger of this type or a firearm of this type. Let's try another one. £6 11.7 ounces, so about 6 3/4 pounds. Let's try one more. £6 15.8 ounces. So this trigger is breaking right about 7 pounds. My trigger finger hasn't been lying to me when I've been shooting this over the years. It is kind of heavy. The break isn't bad, but it is a little heavy for this type of a trigger. Now let's compare that to the full-size M&P 40 that I carried for a number of years on duty. And here's my M&P 40. Again, safety check. Nothing in the pistol. Nothing in the magazine. This pistol does have a magazine disconnect, so I have to have the magazine in there to do this. A little over 5.5 pounds. 5 pounds, 10.9 ounces. Let's try it again. £5 10.5 ounces. One more. £5 11 ounces. How's that for consistency? So this is breaking about a full pound lighter than the M&P Shield. Now what I want to do next is compare this one to my brand new M&P 2.0. Now you may recall when I did the 2.0 video, I said the trigger in this pistol felt better to me than the trigger in the 2.0. Now in all fairness, this pistol has several thousand rounds through it, and when I was evaluating that pistol, it was brand new. In fact, I'd owned it for only a few hours when I made the video. So let's grab the 2.0 back here. This pistol, by the way, does not have a magazine disconnect, so I have no reason to insert a magazine. It is clear. And here we go. £5 11.8 ounces, almost exactly the same as the full size. So maybe this is something that was just in my head when I was shooting the brand new pistol. Let's try it again. £5 9 ounces. One more. Now, in fairness to myself, this pistol has been shot quite a bit since I made that original video, so the trigger may well have gotten a little bit lighter than it was when I was doing that initial firing. But let's try it one more time. And £5 12.1 ounces. Again, very consistent. It's basically right on line with the M&P 40. So again, apparently that perception that I had when I made the original video was a little bit wrong, but also one of the things that's touted in the 2.0 is it has a superior trigger to the previous M&P pistols, and I think we can see by comparing it to the 40, it's still breaking about the same, at least with the pull weight. Now, as far as the amount of creep in the trigger, this one probably has a very nice break. I will say that. And it does feel like, at least at this point, that it's lightened up some over the time that I made that initial video. Now when I grab the M&P 40, at this juncture, these triggers feel almost identical. And again, I've never had a problem with the reset on these pistols. If you watch, if I squeeze, cycle the slide. Right there, my trigger is reset and ready to fire. When I compare that to the 2.0, I know I'm getting farther away from my trigger pull gauge here and trigger pull weights, but since we're talking about triggers, the reset might be just a little bit more noticeable on the 2.0, but I can definitely feel it on the older M&P 40. So I hope you enjoyed this foray into trigger pulls. Again, this is something that I just thought might be kind of fun to look at some of these different firearms. Again, I've talked about so many of them subjectively over the years that it's kind of nice to be able to weigh the triggers now and get an objective view of what those trigger pull weights actually are. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave those below. And as always, until next time, good shooting. Bye-bye.